Okay, good morning and welcome to Mo Knows featuring me, Monica Mo Justice. I'm a tad bit early today. I'm trying to decide what I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna do this. Um, I wonder why I don't have the other. Let me see. Um, all right. Today is TGIF, and over here that means thank God I'm flawless on a Friday. I'm on my way into um sorry, I have to figure out how to do that better. Hold on a second. It's supposed to automatically do that. Oh. All right, so I got that one. I'm missing my YouTube chat. So hold on a second. Um Ooh, I wonder how I gotta figure. I'm gonna change something in the script. I'm about to mess stuff up, I know. But we'll fix it if I mess it up. I won't be doing that right now, but I'm just saying. I'm about to do that. All right, let's see how this goes. Let's do this again. Hey! And then let's get me. Ah! Mm. See, this stuff never works for me. There we go. That's better. That's better. All right. Let's go with that. Okay, we'll do that. This morning's devotion song was a James Ingram song. I believe in those love songs. I'm feeling a little melancholy today. There's some good news and there's some sad news. So, if those of you who've been with me for a while, you know that I think it was in 2020 when we first started the pandemic. Um, I went to read a good book, a lengthy book. Um, and it was this was one of my most this has been a great read. This was a great read at that time, and it's probably going to be a great reread. Um, it's with a broken heart or a sad heart. I report that Albert Woodfox passed away yesterday. Those of you who don't know him, he was part of some people say Angola 4, but it was the Angola 3. He spent 4 years, 4 decades, 4 years, 4 decades in solitary confinement. Um, and he details in this book those 4 decades, how it came about, how he found himself in trouble, which today would be very petty. Um, you know, forgive me for looking at crime as being very petty. I look at crime in terms of why a person commits the crimes they commit and what we can as a society do to rehabilitate folks and get them on a straight path to be successful citizens. Um, Maybe I look at criminals differently or ex criminals differently than the majority of folks. I just look at a person for their human characteristics, not their mistakes that they've made in life. and always wanting the other side of the chain for a person to be able to come back, acclimate into society, and be the best that he could be or the best that she could be. Um, so I look at justice a little bit different than other folks. Because people do make mistakes, or people have been put in positions where they've done bad things, um, but they deserve second chances. Anyway, um, it's just crazy. It's absolutely, it's just, it's absolutely crazy. But it was a great book to read. Too bad. Too bad. No, I'm gonna do things a little differently here. I don't I'm no longer concerned if folks read books with me. Um and I had to come to that conclusion the hard way, because it's not just folks. It's y'all don't read. That's basically it. Y'all read each other. Um you might read a menu, but y'all don't read no books. Darn, half of y'all can hardly write, so I really can't expect y'all to be able to read. But that's par for the course around here. That's interesting. Oh, okay. So I might just come back and do. I don't know if I did a formal book review, but I know I made an announcement that we was going to discuss this book. And I know that I may have discussed components of the book with the late Mr. Walker, Alan Walker, who incidentally was one of those gentlemen who spent a significant period of time incarcerated and came back into society and was here on this internet providing people with meaningful life. Um, I cared for Mr. Walker. I think he was a fond friend of Monica Mo Justice, and he passed away last year, and I was saddened by that loss. And I was saddened by the circumstances that were going on around him at the time of his death. The bickering here on the internet with folks, or same stuff that goes on every day. So I was sad to hear about him passing away. But he too had spent a significant period of time incarcerated, and he gave a different view of life. And you don't get too many of those views these days from folks. I meant to look up something before. The good thing about Mr. Woodfox, when he died, at least he didn't have to, he could be known as not just an ex-criminal, ex-convict. He was actually can consider himself an author of a darn good book. And it was written better than most people write that have been out and have had, that were afforded an education, or that say they have some formal education. What more can I say? What more can I say? And I must admit, when I first picked up this book, I thought that uh, he was um, he was incarcerated for because of his activities as a Black Panther. But he was incarcerated for something else and discovered the Black Panthers in the, while being incarcerated in their lifestyle and what that movement brought to him. In this day and age, when you hear about the Black Panther movement, it's not always presented in a positive light. But for this man, it was a positive. It was a positive. What would I call it? Like when you, like it became his lifestyle. It was a positive lifestyle for him. It's something that he believed in full-heartedly. What's amazing is that during the time that he was incarcerated, he was never made aware that the movement in prison was more stronger than the movement that was on the street. It had already dissipated in society, but behind those bars, it was real alive, and it was an equitable fight. So those are the components of his life story that I found amazing when I read the book. Anyway, I'm not going to take this to work with me because I have it on my tablet. So I'll take my tablet. I don't want to carry a heavy book, but I'll download it. I'll download it on my tablet, and I'll put my tablet in there because I just want to revisit some pages. Maybe I'll come back in the coming days and just do a discussion about it. Glib reached out to me yesterday. He wants to talk about the info guy. I think I will have a conversation with Glib about the info guy. On the grounds of conspiracies. So I will reach out to him if it could take place before sunset today. Then I'm all a go. Otherwise, I'll pick it up sunset tomorrow. So let us explore what that looks like for the folks that don't that are not familiar with this. So sunset New York today is going to be 8:06 p.m. And I'm going to say that's about sunset tomorrow. Be somewhere around 8:06 p.m. So from 8:06 p.m. New York time to 8:06 p.m. New York time tomorrow, I'll be unavailable. Unavailable means unavailable. Don't call me, text me, or anything me. I'm unavailable. I mean it this week. Last week I dipped in it. I struggled to not listen to you guys, and then I caved. Towards the end, it was hot like heck, and I caved. I came down here today to do my hair, but I don't think I need to do too much of anything with it. So I'm just gonna leave my curls the way they are. That takes care of that. I told you guys about Sabbath. Breonna Taylor. What's going on with Breonna Taylor? There have been some new charges dropped, some federal charges on her. I'm going to go to the New York Times article because I found it gave the most detail out of the articles that I read about the case. Now, you may recall Breonna Taylor is the young, I think she was about 26 years old. She was in her 20s. Was murdered by officers in Kentucky. Going to Kentucky, I'm going to the fair to see the senorita with flowers in her hair. Okay. She was part of I can't even call it a botched no knock warrant, but she was murdered in the execution of a illegally obtained no knock warrant. I mean, that's the point that we're at right now. So I'm gonna get into that article about her, and where we are at with these new charges. Let me go pull that up. It's crazy. I remember all the conversations that were had at the time. People on here were live streaming, and they were talking about her lifestyle and the fact that she was dating. She was an EMT, emergency technician, emergency medical technician, and she had a boyfriend, a former boyfriend, who was engaged in illegal activities surrounding drugs, and the police executed a no-knock search warrant, came to her house, alleging that they were looking for documents in her house and or drugs, because apparently, according to their warrant, he had packages delivered to her house, and they had observed him coming from out of the house having received a package. And they said they observed him take the package from that house and leave it in a stash place adjacent to a trap house. Trap houses is where they do the drugging. Anyway, that was all the allegations that were contained inside of the no-knock warrant that they obtained from a judge. And in executing the warrant, they entered her apartment, and her boyfriend, her new boyfriend, not the one that's subject of the search warrant, the boyfriend, with legally permitted to carry inside his home, fired back, not knowing that it was the officers. Because of a no-knock warrant, they had no knocking involved, so he thought it was an intruder, and he stood his ground and fired off at the intruders. The intruders happened to be police officers, and they fired off back. One officer went extremely rogue in the situation. Now, I earlier this year listened to that trial against that officer. He was not charged for his actions of killing Breonna Taylor. He was charged with charges that were related to endangering the neighbors. It was like his not so friendly fire was so reckless that it endangered the lives of the neighbors, her neighbors. So those are the kind of charges that was launched against him. He was acquitted by a jury of his peers. So they couldn't get any justice for Breonna, and they couldn't get any basic quality of life justice for the neighbors. So I guess that elevated or escalated this investigation by the State Department. Is it the Justice Department? The Justice Department took this on, and now they brought charges against not just that officer, but 4 officers in total. So let's see what that yields us. Weird, isn't it? All the stuff these days is really weird to me. All right, let's see where we are at. Head of team anywhere and other job titles from uncertain time. Oh, let me just. I never been. I've always just clicked on a link. I never just went to go find the damn thing. And since they've been charged, the officers have all been arrested. Here we go. Okay, so here we go with the article. And this is written yesterday, August 4th. More than 2 years after police officers killed Breonna Taylor during a late night raid of her apartment in Louisville. Louis? Notice? I gotta stop. I gotta stop. See, this is Louis, and they pronounce it Louis as well. Just a side note for somebody. Louisville, Kentucky. The Justice Department announced a series of federal charges Thursday against four of the officers involved in the operation that set off racial justice protests across the country. Federal prosecutors accused 3 officers of knowingly including false information in an affidavit used to justify the raid. That would be the search warrant. That would be the warrant. Nice way of putting it, but just want to put it what it is. The warrant. That's the affidavit. And a 4th officer of firing blindly into Mrs. Taylor's apartment from outside, sending bullets flying into a unit next door where an unsuspecting family slept. All right, now let's make this very clear because I did watch the trial earlier this year. The officer that did all of this Rambo shooting did not request the warrant. He was not part of the team that did the investigation. He was ancillary. He was the dog. Listen, this dude was the dog officer. This is why it's very important to cover these cases after you've heard the facts that's been entered into court, because all of this conversation behind the scenes, and I know this, you know that, doesn't do us any good until we find out what facts are brought into the courtroom, what a jury is considering as they deliberate. So this dude was the canine officer with the canine dog, okay? And he was called to serve as a backup, serve in some capacity of bringing the canine dog into the scene to probably look for drugs or something to that effect. Instead, when they got to the scene, he was shifted in position to be one of the frontline officers as they went in. He went in with a gun. He didn't go in with the canine, okay? He had no doggy with him. He only had his hoggy. The dude was crazy. Yo, watching the trial, y'all gotta go back and get clips of it. Homie even made like the sound, like it was the weirdest thing listening to him testify how he shot. Like he made the gunshot sounds, whatever the sound was that guns make. He did that. Like it was a little much. It was a little much for me, but I don't really have any experience with guns. So I got something in my eye. So at the end of the day, That was weird. That was really weird listening to him. But he was like, cha-chung, cha-chung. That's just crazy. All right. The indictments unsealed on Thursday do not charge either of the two white officers who shot Miss Taylor, a black 26-year-old. They do not charge either of the two white officers who shot Miss Taylor, a black 26-year-old emergency room technician. Dude, you got all of these emojis. And I can't see what they are because I don't have that. Let me. Oh, you gotta let. Oh, I didn't notice. You gotta hit these every time. Oh, hold on. Oh, I see it. Anyway, the indictments unsealed on Thursday do not charge either of the two white officers who shot Miss Taylor, a black 26-year-old emergency room technician, Eek, whose former boyfriend the police were investigating for possibly selling drugs. But the charges are the most aggressive effort yet to hold police officers accountable in the case that has become a rallying cry for the Black Lives Matter movement. It's become a cry for black women seeking justice since Sandra Bland. That's just my take on things. So, say it as it is. All right. The officer accused of firing into Mrs. Taylor's apartment, or is it Ms. Taylor's apartment, Brett Hankerson, had been tried and acquitted on state charges of endangering her neighbors. The only officers that have faced charges until now. None have been charged for what prosecutors say was the use of false information to obtain a search warrant. Now, it's political in Kentucky. That's where that dude from the Senate, what's that guy's name? Mitch McConnell comes from. And there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. It's a story for another day, another way. Let me see what Karen had to say. As I was watching, they were speaking about how the police false informed her mom. Yeah, there was a lot of things. There were a lot of things that happened when they murdered her, and they maintained her body at the scene because they were investigating themselves, and I think they had botched this so bad that they arrested it. That's a whole nother breakdown, Miss KK. Yes, she was. That's definitely was it. Yeah, that's a fact. I understand that the community as a whole is outraged and rallying and seeking justice for her. I'm speaking from the perspective of a woman having been through the Sandra Bland situation where she was arrested and ultimately said to have hung herself in custody. When it's crimes against black women, we tend to not have justice. However, I've always been a strong advocate that they killed our black men for years, decades, right? They incarcerated them. They've taken them out of our homes, out of our families, out of our community for a long time. And we were patiently or frivolously silent on the sidelines watching this tragedy to our families occur. When they start killing our women, and this is what I felt when I came to this J for K community, when they start killing our women in plain sight and expect us not to speak on it, act on it, or be about something with it, they are sadly mistaken. There's more to just killing us and allowing us to just die without any sanity, that we're not going to put up with. They've already done it to our men. So we have to stand up when they start to do it, especially to our women, because then no one's safe. I've been on this YouTube now for 5-6 years, and I always hear the position that the man is supposed to be protecting his family, protecting his woman. We can't expect the woman to have protected the man. Yada, yada, yada. Now, what are we saying now when we see these things occurring? There are so many different places that we functionally as a people are not part of. We're not part of the political maze that we need to be part of. We're not making the economic impact that we need to be making in these areas. What does that entail? That entails mapping out plans and executing them. We need to do what the other communities do effectively. We need to act like the Asians when they come over here and they build up their communities and they educate their people. They have a whole ecosystem of their culture that's defined for them, that they're able to. We don't hardly hear about their criminals. They exist. They have the same type of atrocities in there. They have gang activity. They have similar things that we have in the Black community occur in all these other communities. The difference is that they cater to their own. They educate their own. They supply them. That you will find supply them. You will find them infiltrated in the hospital systems. They're embedded in the court system. They're lawyers. They're judges. They got their political resources. They invest in their politicians. They pay to play. Y'all understand that term when y'all want to beg people around here for money to hit up your Cash App and stuff. This is what it means in a real community when you pay to play. These are all the infrastructures that you need in place to protect your citizens from being taken apart like this. Our culture is the hood. Okay. I'm all down for having a hood culture. In that hood culture, I don't have time for it. In the hood culture, you need to have your people spread it. The reason why folks really like these gangster type movies that come out here is because those characters that you see in those films generally have done this culture-based thing that I'm talking about. They've infiltrated the policy position makers so that when they find themselves up against the wall, they have the resources around them to support them, which we're lacking here. I see you have a long comment, so let me see. We have a divide and conquer community. So here's the thing, we often speak about all of the problems. We have all identified our weaknesses. And we can sit here and till the cows come home, or till I'm no longer here, right? I could be deceased. And we will still have the same problems in our identified. The issue is when we're going to institute and initiate and execute a plan to get us from one hood type to being on the same level as the other communities. When I look at the black community, or I look at my immediate community that I'm in, um and my immediate community right now is where I grew up at. And I remember my white neighbors who no longer live here, or do they? Um, Recently, just looking at some of the properties around us, they still owned by the same people. The white folks moved out and they rented to folks. I didn't realize how many people were renting over here. But with all of that being said, one of my neighbors down the block is Asian. Asian homeowner that moved on the block. So the bottom line is, we need to stop complaining about what the issue is and start working to resolve those issues. And it does start in the family. It starts in, we got more young folks aspiring to be athletic and make these mega $1 million contracts based on their athletic abilities, opposed to getting us some doctors and lawyers. And I say lawyers, but we got a significant number of them, but I don't know what they're doing. But we definitely need to do everything within ourselves. So we need to build up those networks. We need to build up that infrastructure, and it's not in place. It's not in place yet. The officer accused of firing into Miss Taylor's apartment. I gotta think about that gender war. Let me come back to that on another. It just hit me. Let me come back to that on another level, because I don't want to integrate it with this conversation right now. But I think it's a bigger conversation to be had. So we'll come back and we'll discuss that. Maybe for worship on Sunday. Sunday's worship is really dedicated to the deceivers. So I'll figure out how to come back, but I think I'm understanding what you're saying about this is a timeout moment. I just had a thought process go through me. We'll come back on that one. The officer accused of firing into Ms. Taylor's apartment, Brent Hankerson, had been tried and acquitted on state charges of endangering her neighbors, the only officer to have faced charges until now. None have been charged for what prosecutors say was the use of false information to obtain the search warrant that authorized officers to burst into Ms. Taylor's home as she slept next to her new boyfriend. They kill me. They just kill me. The police used a battering ram to force their way through the door of the apartment shortly after midnight on March 13th, 2020. Ms. Taylor's boyfriend, who feared they were intruders, fired a shot that struck one of the officers in the leg. 3 officers returned fire, spraying the apartment with more than 30 bullets, 6 of which struck Miss Taylor. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Breonna Taylor should be alive today, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland said at a news conference announcing the charges. He said that the officers' false statements on the search warrant affidavit has set in motion the events that led to Miss Taylor's death. That's a foreseeable event. It's foreseeable. And I don't understand where her mother's case, if I don't understand and I haven't followed. So if I'm wrong, provide me with the information in the comments. What's the status of their lawsuit? Because there should be a lawsuit, because this is definitely wrongful death. And The civil lawsuit um should it should be significant. So I don't know, because I haven't followed in depth that part of this story, or this event, this saga. The Justice Department has been investigating the Louisville police department for more than a year, reviewing complaints of the regular use of wait a minute complaints of the regular use of unreasonable force, and whether police officers who break the department's rules are held accountable. The indictments announced on Thursday could result in the first criminal penalties against the officers involved, two of whom have been fired, with the other two recommended for firing, but they fell short of public demands during months of protests to prosecute the two officers who shot and killed Ms. Taylor. Again, it's political in the state that they're in, which is Kentucky. Mr. Garland noted that none of the officers who carried out the raid had been aware that the warrant they were executing had been based on false claims, which came out in that trial of the other officer that I watched earlier this year. Prosecuting the two officers who shot Miss Taylor could be difficult, some legal analysts have said, because they were returning fire during what they believed to be a legitimate law enforcement operation, which is probably so. I don't know if this article says it. All right, Miss. So one of the officers is a female officer, and she's apparently turning on them. So let's see how it goes. Ms. Taylor's mother said the federal charges vindicated her long-standing claim that the police had no right to enter her daughter's home. What we've been saying was the truth, that they shouldn't have been there, she said, later adding, I've waited 874 days for today. The case led to intense protests in Louisville and helped spur marches and rallies across the United States as anger boiled over after a series of police shootings of black people. Louisville fired its police chief amid protests over Ms. Taylor's death and reached there go my question. A $20 million, sorry, I gave him more money than what it's supposed to be. $12 million settlement with her family, in which the city also agreed to a series of reforms, such as ensuring that ambulances were stationed nearby during. I wonder how I missed the settlement part, because I read this part about the ambulance. All right, such as ensuring that ambulances were stationed nearby during future police raids. That's good. That's a reasonable request coming out of this. The only thing is the ambulance got to make sure they don't have their lights going. Anyway, and of course, they've done away with the no-knock warrants, which allow police officers to enter homes without announcing themselves. I think states where they have the right to carry and carry permits should not be enforcing no-knock warrants anyway, because there's potential that a person behind there has a gun. So you need to knock and announce yourself. A judge had initially signed off. Okay, now this is critical. A judge had initially signed off on the no-knock warrant for entering Miss Taylor's apartment, but the officers were later instructed. This is very important. The officers, there's two things coming out of this that's very important. The officers were later instructed to knock and identify themselves. Whether the police actually identify themselves has long been in dispute. None, I repeat, none of the officers had activated their body cameras. And while officers said they had announced themselves as the police, Ms. Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, said he and Ms. Taylor heard no response when they asked who was at the door. The federal indictments followed a separate investigation by Kentucky's Attorney General. And this dude is a Republican, which resulted in charges against Mr. Hankinson. In one of the new federal indictments, Mr. Hankinson is now charged with depriving Ms. Taylor, her boyfriend, and 3 of their neighbors of their rights by firing 10 bullets through a window and sliding glass door that were both covered by blinds. So what they're saying is he had no visual into the facility, into the place he was firing, and you need to fire with visibility. You have to have a visible suspect, and by firing blindly into that type of scenario, he did not meet the criterion. All right, the other 3 officers, 2 detectives and a sergeant, are accused of including information they knew to be false in an affidavit submitted to a judge in order to obtain the search warrant, and then lying to cover up what they had done. One of the detectives, who was fired over his role in the raid, had sent a draft of the affidavit to a fellow detective in which prosecutors said he falsely claimed to have verified that Ms. Taylor's former boyfriend was receiving packages at her address. In fact, according to the prosecutor, there was no evidence of such packages. This is the female detective. Knew that the claim was false, the charging document said, but did not object to it. She is also accused of adding a misleading claim that the former boyfriend was using the address to Mrs. Taylor's apartment as his current address. So all of that information that we read in our original warrant is false. The 3rd officer charged led the unit handling the investigation and approved the affidavit despite knowing that it contained the false information, which violated Ms. Taylor's rights. According to the indictment, he was also charged with lying to the FBI by falsely claiming that the police department's SWAT team had requested a no-knock warrant, which prosecutors said was false. The federal prosecutors also alleged that these 2 met with Mr. James' garage as scrutiny of the case began. Oh, God. So they conspired now to mount and try. Wait a minute. They met in somebody's garage as scrutiny of the case began to mount and tried to cover their tracks. They made a plan to falsely tell investigators that a sergeant had informed them that packages were being sent to Miss Bye-bye birdies. Just bye-bye. That packages were being sent to Miss Taylor's apartment for her former boyfriend, according to the charges. They ultimately told that lie to multiple agencies, the charges said, including the police department's internal affairs units, the Kentucky's Attorney General's office, and the FBI. Okay, these people don't have lawyers on record right now, so nobody could corroborate stuff. But anyway, Whoever this James person was charged with conspiring to impede the federal investigation, falsifying records, and violating Ms. Taylor's constitutional right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. Mr. Meany was also charged with a civil rights violation and lying to the FBI. Ms. Gottlieb was charged with conspiring to falsify the affidavit for the search warrant and hinder the subsequent investigation into the raid. Mr. Meany and Ms. Gottlieb were still employed by the Louisville Metro Police Department as of Thursday, though the city's police chief said she had moved to fire both of them after the charges were announced. So remember, they got a new chief of police over there, and it's a woman, and I guess she ain't done nothing yet. It is critical that any illegal or inappropriate actions by law enforcement be addressed comprehensively in order to continue our efforts to build police community trust. All of the suspects, which is why I tried not to mention their names, or all of the people who are charged are innocent until proven guilty. Just thought I put that disclaimer on it. Anywho, that's where we are at now. Those are the facts that I will present on this channel, and I'll look through my archive of videos on the Breonna Taylor. They're very long videos here because we had extensive conversation, and I'll put together clippings, and so I'm gonna do a series of things with it based on our previous conversations, like what were we told then to what are we told now, and see where we go from there. Anyway, questions, comments, and concerns out of the chat. If you made it all the way to this point, then you should have hit the like button. Because as a parent, you liked my vibe, then you definitely should subscribe. Otherwise, we're in a good standing right now. I want to thank those that came in. Next time you come in, do drop in, bring a friend. Because we're going to need help around here if you don't talk about the people around there. Anyway, I'm just so silly. Today's broadcast was brought to you by the